This week, which happens to be week 176 since first beginning some years ago on these sutta explorations. And for this week, we return back to the numerical discourses, Book of the Threes. The sutta is Saṅgārava Sutta, Discourse to Saṅgārava. This is different than the last, I think, 4 weeks that we covered the Samanya Phala, fruits of reclusehood, or what is a recluse? What are the fruits of following the lifestyle, the practice, the training of a recluse? What are to be expected as the fruits of such a lifestyle? So even though it is from a different group of discourses, nevertheless, and the title is different, the setting is somewhat different, but essentially it's still continuing on the underlying theme of what it's all about. Because everyone has a different perspective. Everyone has a different understanding when they first come to ask questions from the Buddha. When we first open a book on the Dhamma, to read a discourse, to read a segment, to read a verse, let's say from the Sutta Nipata, and see just what the Dhamma is all about. So we bring our own set of criteria, definitions, libraries, if you will. I like to call them baggage. Because most of these things will not go in line with the Dhamma. And that's why we're there. I mean, the student will have to learn. That's why the student has reached a point where they are willing to knock on any door that they could find to learn, to find out the answers. This curiosity is essential. Now, oftentimes we see in the suttas that perhaps not everyone did come to the Buddha with such an intention. Many people came trying to assert or affirm or seek the confirmation of the Buddha as to their own thoughts, their own interpretations of what, let's say, life is all about, or what is awakening, what is their philosophy in life. So not everyone came with the purest of intentions to learn, to come out of suffering. Nevertheless, many of such encounters did turn into a learning experience for them, where many of them developed a new understanding. So many of them took refuge, majority of them, in the Triple Gem, and a big group of them also sought to go forth and become ordained. This is important because oftentimes we forget the value of interacting with one another. Exposure. And even that exposure is under question. How much are we really open to receive from that exposure to another's ideas, to someone else's interpretations and understanding? So I'm saying it, I'm giving you almost a synopsis, but not exactly, of what the message of this sutta is. Here you have a brahmin, a young brahmin, who obviously is attached, is part of the royal class in his interactions with the court. He's a brahmin. So the brahmins and the Khattiya, which were or are still the noble class which were Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha was from that class of society. Then ended up ruling the country, ruling the Jambudvipa, or the peninsula of India, Indian culture. So Brahmins were very much in interaction with them, usually in terms of counselors, consultants, but especially within the arena of religiosity and ceremonies and rituals and mantras and practices of sacrifices, which essentially is what brings Saṅgārava to the Buddha. We will see. Where he's asking the Buddha for somewhat of a confirmation of his thoughts and beliefs, such as, well, sacrifices are everything for the Brahmin because it has to be done a certain way, with certain chanting of a certain mantra in a certain order, proper enunciation, proper pronunciation. The timing has to be perfect so that, and the sacrifice has to be done correctly. Usually, at the time of the Buddha, the Brahmins were very much involved in killing of animals, and in some cases, killing of people. Not just at the time of the Buddha, even recently in our own lifetime, in Nepal, the king of, at the time they had a king, once a year he would slaughter, and then they're Brahmins, they're Hindu. They would have to, or the king, part of their rituals was to kill, slaughter a whole, well, I don't know if it was 1,000 or 100, but at least 100. Probably, I think I might have heard 1,000, but I'm not sure. But at least 100 oxen, bull, cattle were sacrificed once a year to bring in blessings. Imagine the bloodbath. So that was very much alive and well at the time of the Buddha. So you have several suttas where Brahmins would come asking the Buddha about how important the sacrifices are, and the Buddha says, I do not praise such a sacrifice when there's bloodshed involved, where beings are being sacrificed, suffering. Instead, he says, there's the sacrificing of one's own wrong views, the hatred, anger, especially wrong actions. The tendencies have to be sacrificed, given up, where there is no bloodshed, nothing necessarily observable, because this also brought with them, when they sacrificed animals, a lot of prestige, because that automatically meant that you are very, very well off, very wealthy. So the more the number, like as the case was in Nepal, the king sacrificing so many bulls, that tells you, because each one of them costs a fortune for a farmer. So that's establishing your status among society members. And then you can go ahead and, let's say, distribute the meat and give to the people, and the people will, say, oh, we worship you even more. Thank you we got food for at least a day. Oh, by the way, the sacrifice brought with it punya, a lot of merits. And that's what we see Saṅgārava asking. But why? He is doing a comparison. He is going to put the importance on. He's a Brahmin. He's talking about sacrifices. He's going to be placing the importance upon the act of sacrifice as something superior to that of a recluse. That's the connection I made to the last sutta we covered for 4 weeks, Samanya Pala. And we're going to see the Buddha's response and the lovely images that he will give in such a clear, overarching teaching that he will provide to Saṅgārava, not just to him, but also to us. Because over the centuries, even within the Dhamma itself, within different denominations and traditions that came out, but as in the Mahayana, where the person had to relinquish, or it was more valued to give up, in their mind, one's own practice for the sake of sacrificing oneself and one's own freedom, liberation, to help others, which is based on wrong view. Because how could you help someone else if you are not being helped? The typical example is when you're on a plane and the stewardess comes, the flight attendant says, in case of emergency, when the masks drop from the roof, from the top, from above you, to give you oxygen, before you take that mask and put it on a child who's sitting next to you, or someone who's weaker than you, unable to do that, before you think about that, you must first put the mask on yourself. Otherwise, what's the point if you're dead and the other person, the child, is with a mask? So it's very unwise. Even something on a conventional level, we see how valid that is. But for centuries, that has been pushed as something more noble than the lifestyle of a bhikkhu, proper bhikkhu at the time of the Buddha, as taught by the Buddha. So we have different differences or variations of what we mean by sacrifices. To this day, this continues on. It's bigger, it's better if you give of yourself, sacrifice of yourself, this and that. Meanwhile, the main work that has to be done is on yourself. No one else can do that for you. And what are you teaching? What are you sacrificing to go and help others with? What are you helping them with? We never ask, because it looks nice. I am putting myself on the cross for you. I am sacrificing my time and energy for you. It has a nice ring to it, doesn't it? It keeps you up and in a unique position as, wow. That is not so different than the king butchering, slaughtering thousands of animals. That still plays to this day. Perhaps not with bloodshed of animals, but with the sacrifice of one's life, when it's so rare to have a human life, to be born as a human at the time when the Dhamma, the Buddha's teachings, are still available for us to guide ourselves out of suffering, and then in doing so, to help others to walk out with us by example. That's what the Buddha did. The Buddha didn't say, well, I'm going to postpone my awakening to go and help others. Well, how are you going to help anyone if you haven't even helped yourself? No one asks the Mahayanists about that. It's a given, and it's ludicrous through and through, but it sounds nice because there's postponing. And that's what we're going to see the Buddha bringing the attention back to, not postponing, and to the importance of getting the right teaching, and which is what he will provide to Saṅgārava. So that's in a nutshell, a big nutshell. Let's dive in. So this is Anguttara Nikaya, the numerical discourses, book number 3, Tika Nipata. Tika means 3. 3.60, Anguttara Nikaya, AN 3.60. Saṅgārava Sutta, discourse to Saṅgārava. Let's begin. Once the young Brahmin Saṅgārava approached the Blessed One, and after exchanging friendly greetings with him, he sat down to one side and said, Venerable Sir, I have considered this. We Brahmins should make sacrifices and make others do sacrifices too. The reason for this, of course, is that it is our conviction that those who do the sacrifices and those who participate in such sacrifices engage in accruing numerous merits that extend to more individuals than just themselves. But those who go forth from this or other sect and become thus homeless, recluses, they would be merely taming, controlling, and extinguishing their own passions, leading only to their own liberation at best. Hence, by going forth, they are only seeking wisdom for themselves, and therefore making merits for only themselves. This is the premise of Mahayana. This is the premise of even the Vajrayana. In their position, establishing of their position towards the Arahants, towards the teachings of the Buddha proper, which they felt, no, it is necessary for us to augment, to add things, because the Buddha's message was very limited because it taught a person to be selfish, self-absorbed, uncaring about others. Well, here we see Saṅgārava being, in a sense, the first Mahayanist. Mahayana showed up hundreds of years, in fact, about 1,000 years after the Buddha died. Proper as, Mahayana. But they were, over time, the development, because it is more intriguing, more convincing. I mean, come on, the person is saying here, by doing the sacrifice, I'm doing it for you. I'm making this prayer for you. I'm chanting for you. So you also can become awakened, free from sacrifice. Show me one person who has benefited from such ludicrous activity. But it sounds lovely. It makes a person becomes all emotional. You have entire religions like that. Whether it's Christianity or even Manichaeism and other traditions, Bhakti Yoga, it's all about that. It's like, I'm sacrificing myself, even though I'm not sacrificing an animal. I'm sacrificing my entire future. In this case, though, he is specifically speaking about making sacrifices, things that bring merits. The merit here is, in Pali, punya. But the Buddha was very clear in many different suttas. He also says, what's the point of merits if it's just going to land you in a nicer place, a nicer apartment, nicer house, nice. In this case, I'm using it as a reference to even being reborn in a heavenly realm, when you soon enough will end up falling from that state. Even if you come back as a human, not as a deva, into a nice place, into a nice family, nice affluent. You have many rich people around in the world. Very affluent, unimaginably rich. What's going to happen to them at the end of this life? They're going to use up those merits. And they're going to die. And they're back into the hamster wheel. To do what? Make more merits, if they are taught how to. Okay. You see the cycle of rebirth? Anyone who takes the bodhisattva vow is actually in the cycle of rebirth indefinitely, will not be coming even to the Dhamma anytime soon. So it's a luxury they don't have. This life, this is it. You have already worked to get here. What are you doing? Wasting it away. Following these insidious ideas of postponing for the sake of, no, now is not the time, I'm going to sacrifice. But here was a rich person, a brahmin, the king, same thing. Even if Siddhartha did not leave the palace, he was still going to be engaged in sacrificing. That's what a king is expected to do. Society is expecting him to do that. But then he's also putting down anyone who is pursuing their own development. Those who go forth from other sects, including this one, so he's criticizing the Buddha. He's criticizing the Dhamma, even though he's there. So here is an example of what I was referring to earlier, where someone comes to the Buddha saying, this is what I believe, and I'm here basically to get a confirmation from you that what I believe is the accurate path and not this one. And if you don't agree, I'm going to point out to you why you are wrong. That's what he's essentially doing. We Brahmins believe in sacrifice because by doing a sacrifice, you are gaining merits for yourself and for others. Meanwhile, you going to under a tree in the forest, desolate areas to practice on your own, or at least shaving your head and putting on the robes and walking away from society, giving up your passions, giving up your desires, giving up the possibility to have your own family, your own children, making money. By you doing that, you're extremely selfish. Because that's eventually, only if it's going to help, it's only going to help you. Actually, it sounds very much like some of the comments I've heard from the closest friends in my life when I decided to go forth. Let's see what the Buddha says. And the Blessed One replied by saying, well, Brahmin, I will now question you on this, and you may reply as you wish. Here, Brahmin, the Tathagata arises in the world, an Arahat, perfectly awakened, endowed with true knowledge and conduct, the fortunate one, the knower of existence, the matchless tamer of those to be tamed, the teacher of both devas and humans, the awakened and the Blessed One. He then declares, come, this is the path. This is the method. It is by coming to this path and method that I have understood the noble end of the holy life and therein abide, myself, having realized it with direct knowledge. Come. And if you also practice diligently as I did, then this path and method will allow you to reach the noble end of the holy life as well, which you too, through your own direct experience and full understanding, will come to know and realize for yourself. In this manner, the teacher teaches and others come to that path and method. Now, with this being the case, is this not then for the benefit of hundreds, for the benefit of thousands itself? Is it not, therefore, for the benefit of countless other beings? And with this being the case, then, would the merits to be gained by the deliberate act of going forth amount to be only for the benefit of a single individual, or for innumerable and countless other beings as well, besides oneself? That's a challenge. The Brahmin Saṅgārava then replied by saying, Venerable Sir, given the way you have just explained it, I must admit that the merits to be gained by the deliberate act of going forth are truly for the benefit of innumerable and countless more beings. So he admits it. Now, we don't know if he actually, at this point, whether he really, deeply understood and appreciated the answer to be, this being the correct answer. Let's not forget, the Buddha's example is the perfect demonstration of this, whatever the Buddha just declared. He went, and that's what he says, right? He said, come, I have attained through practicing this method. I have found this method to work because I am no longer the same person I was. I don't have suffering. I'm free. I've made it to the other side, to the other shore. I have relinquished pain. There's no more future becoming for me. I am liberated. Do you want to be free from suffering? Oh, you do? Okay, come and then follow this method and you too will. But how was that going to be possible if no one had actually done that? No one had actually struggled to find such a path and found it, even more important, by having walked on such a path. So he knows exactly every step of the way what is to be encountered because he has been on that journey. He crossed over. And now he's teaching it to others. So where is the selfish part in that? Where is the self-absorbed part in that? That's why the Arahant's job is complete, unlike what is taught in the Mahayana, in all of the traditions of Mahayana, including in Zen, where the Arahant is mocked often in some of the traditions of Zen, that the Arahant has more work to do. The Arahant, imagine, Lord Buddha was an Arahant. That means that the Buddha had more work to do. He wasn't fully awakened. He had to take more vows to become awakened. That is how ludicrously nuts, foolish the whole premise is. Because there's a difference in understanding what it's meant by sacrifice. You're sacrificing what? Gratification. Following on the footsteps of all these 8 other billion people, which is the easy thing, to follow your passions and to put a flag on it and call it spiritual. I mean, you see this all around the world. We have come up with so many different designations to sublimate, to increase the value of whatever these things are. People look at the passions and call it spiritual. Lust has become spiritual. Anger is justified as something spiritual. It's part and parcel of many religions. Blood is normal. Shedding of blood is a normal thing. It's part and parcel. Symbolism is added to that. All this is vile. All this has nothing to do with the spiritual path. They missed the boat because they missed to understand, to ask the real questions. Because the real sacrifice is happening here within you. How you're willing to live life by looking at the patterns that you were following, which kept you in darkness, which kept you in suffering. And then you started looking for a way out. That is what the Dhamma provides, the Dhamma that the Buddha taught. That is Nissarana. That is escaping that vicious cycle of gratification, seeking satisfaction by following the 6 senses, for example. But to seek an escape from that, that's what the recluse is doing. That's the only way that you actually will cut yourself from suffering for good, never to have to undergo rebirth again. You're out of samsara. You're scot-free, as they say. You've crossed over, and now you can teach it to all those who come to you seeking a way out because they're suffering. This is courageous because you really are helping a person, really, to cut loose themselves from suffering, because only one can do it for oneself. No one can do it for us. No one. No one can save us by having saved themselves, and by that token, we don't have to do anything. Well, he is my God, so I'm okay because I don't have to, I just can bow to him. I just can say some mantras. We're good to go. Why? Because he's the God. He's it. He's, by extension, I am also free. There's no such thing. The method has to be taught by the one who made over, or who did cross over the flood of passions, of wrong views, of hatred, of desire to become somebody who's crossed over those floods, who knows the method. I have to go to them because they know. They can teach me. Aha. That is key. But I have to follow that teaching from the person who really made it, who knows it. Now, so Saṅgārava admitted that based on what you and how you described it, Bhante, I have to say that, going forth is really beneficial for both oneself as well as for countless other beings. When this was said, the Venerable Ananda said to the Brahmin Saṅgārava, Brahmin, of these two methods, which one is less prominent, less troublesome, while the other being more fruitful and more effective? Venerable Ananda is teasing a proper answer out of him, because now we know that he was simply superficially stating that, well, based on what Bhante Gautama said, I have to agree that becoming a recluse is more beneficial. That was simply superficial. He didn't mean it. So Venerable Ananda is digging deeper to get him to admit, really, and if he doesn't understand or believe in the fact of that, of what is said, then to really come out and say, to disagree at least. But let's see what he's going to do, Saṅgārava. And the young Saṅgārava, Brahmin Saṅgārava, replied to the Venerable Ananda by saying, as I revere and applaud Master Gautama, so also I revere and applaud Venerable Ananda, meaning respect. For the second time, the Venerable Ananda said, Brahmin, I do not ask you which one of us here is revered and applauded. Instead, Brahmin, I ask you which of these two methods is less prominent, less troublesome, while the other happens to be more fruitful and more effective. So he's saying, who cares? I'm not asking you which one of us you revere most or you accept. That's beside the point. I'm asking you a direct question. Don't evade. To go sacrificing other beings for the sake of gaining merits and then saying that, oh, that's also helping other beings, even though you're killing animals over there. I don't know how you're going to be helping other beings. And then here, you just said, the life of a recluse, the path of a recluse is far better, even though it is focusing on oneself, but it nevertheless helps countless other beings even more. So that's what Venerable Ananda is asking him to admit, that it is even more, much more than sacrifice. And for the second time, the young Brahmin Saṅgārava said to the Venerable Ananda, as I revere and applaud Master Gautama, so also I revere and applaud Venerable Ananda. So twice he evaded the question. And for the third time, the Venerable Ananda said, Brahmin, I do not ask you which one of us here is revered and applauded. So he's saying the same thing. And for the third time, the Brahmin Saṅgārava repeated to Venerable Ananda, as I revere and applaud Master Gautama, so also I revere and applaud Venerable Ananda. I guess in those days, that was a way to politely diss somebody off or just push them away or just ignore their question in a respectful, almost seeming to be respectful, but it's not. First of all, you're not answering the question, you're avoiding it. And then you're sugarcoating it by saying, well, I also, as Bhante Gautama said, I respect Venerable Ananda as well. So let's put that aside and move on. Avoid the question. At this, the thought occurred to the Blessed One, the Buddha. The Brahmin Saṅgārava, Lord Buddha is thinking this. The Brahmin Saṅgārava is evading this legitimate question put to him by Ananda. What if I release him from this tense situation? So beautiful. Lovely, lovely way to see how such a beautiful, great teacher thinks in relation to this student. He's not a student yet, by the way. But he knows that he's in a turmoil. He's like, and Lord Buddha seeing the heart, the mind state of this young man. So the Blessed One asked the young Brahmin Saṅgārava another question. While attending the meeting at the royal palace in the presence of the great king today, what was the topic of discussion, Brahmin? Completely asking about what seems to be a completely different question. You can almost go, you can see Saṅgārava going, oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. You released me from that hot seat that Venerable Ananda put me in, placed me in. So what was the conversation? Because you came from the king's court, right? So what might have been the topic of discussion today in the presence of the king? And he says, Venerable sir, the topic of conversation was this. In the past, although there were fewer bhikkhus, yet more of them displayed superhuman and psychic powers. But today, even though there are many more bhikkhus, only a few among them are able to display superhuman and psychic powers. This, Venerable Sir, was the topic of discussion as I sat at the meeting held at the royal palace today in the presence of the great king. Imagine if today's rulers discuss such topics instead of waging war and destroying life, going after each other's resources under pretenses. So the king and his retinue were thinking, in the past, religious individuals, practitioners, bhikkhus. Bhikkhu was not a term, by the way, established by the Buddha. It was a term for a recluse, ascetic. So this is not originally Buddhist in nature, but in the world, it has become a designation for a monk who fully ordained monk, meaning with the upasampada, the higher ordination monk of the Buddha's tradition, specifically of the earliest. As I was mentioning, Mahayanas and others, they say it in the Sanskrit version, which is Bhikkhu, by the way, just as a footnote there. So anyhow, that was the topic. Whether, why is there not that many, are there not that many ascetics today who have such unique psychic abilities, basically? And this is where the Buddha responds or adds to it. Brahmin, there are these three types of miracles. What three? The miracle of psychic powers, the miracle of knowing the hearts and minds of others along with their intentions, and the miracle of instruction. Remember, this sutta comes from the book of the threes, Tika Nipada. Tika means, or Ti means three. Here are the three. That's why Anguttara Nikaya is so lovely in its organization, because you have three of this in the book of the threes, four of this in the book of the fours, etc., all the way to book 11, where you have 11 of this, 11 of that, etc. So here we're going to see Lord Buddha now delving into these three, because the topic of conversation at the king's court was about miracles. And today we have our own understanding of miracles. Anyhow, without going on a tangent, let's dive in. And what Brahman is the miracle of psychic powers? This is the first type of miracle that the Buddha is highlighting here. Here, Brahman, someone uses various forms of psychic powers, such as while being one, he becomes many. And on becoming many, he reverts back to being one, making copies of oneself. I mentioned this last week, I think, in reference to, Saṅgārava Sutta, and I believe I gave the example of Chulapantaka, Venerable Chulapantaka, and how he was considered as the top bhikkhu, the one who is the best at doing that, making copies of himself, and then reverting back to being one again. Let's continue. He appears and disappears without any obstructions, moving through walls unhindered, through solid embankments and rocks, as though passing through space. He dives into the earth and comes out of it as though it were liquid. He walks on water as though it were solid ground. While sitting cross-legged, he travels in space like a small or a large bird. With his bare hand, he touches the moon and the sun that are so powerful, and goes on exercising and wielding his powers unobstructed as far as the Brahma world. So he can even travel to different realms. not just physical realms, but different dimensional realms, if you want to call it, meaning in the 31 realms of existence. The Brahma realms are the highest. This Brahman is the miracle of psychic powers. And what Brahman is the miracle of knowing the hearts and minds of others along with their intentions? Here, Brahman, someone, through the use of a sign, nimitta, we call it in Pali, as his base, understands and reveals. Your mind is in such and such a state, and it is so and not otherwise. These are the thoughts you are having and pondering, and these are your intentions. In this manner, he declares what he sees with accuracy and certainty. And no matter what others say to deny or conceal these facts, all that would be of no use, for his penetrating sight would still remain accurate and true. So this is the one method that practitioners would train themselves to have the sight, if you want to call it that, of what in modern parlance we call telepathy, or to be able to see the other person's intentions and mind state or heart state by the use of nimitta. So that is how it requires concentration. It requires relinquishing other things, distractions, of course. So the person has to go into different levels of jhana, allowing the mind to get to a point, one-pointedness, unification, and to direct it eventually after it has settled, become collected, to direct it, but you're using a nimitta, a sign. Now, the Buddha does not elaborate on the sign, but it could be a number of many, as we see in other suttas, described in further detail. Anyhow, next. Furthermore, someone else without the use of a sign, but having the capacity and possibility to hear the voices or thoughts of other humans, non-humans, and even devas, similarly makes the declaration, your mind is in such and such a state, and it is so and not otherwise. These are the thoughts you are having and pondering, and these are your intentions. So basically, in this case, the person is able to hear the voices of and see the thoughts and of the devas, because the devas also, the divine beings also have thoughts, many of them, and also non-humans, not just devas, like animals and even invisible beings that are not human. So somebody who's able to see that and hear their voices is able to then look at you and say, these are your intentions, even though you're saying these words, but that's what is really going on inside of you. So you can't fool me. In this manner, he declares what he sees with accuracy and certainty, and no matter what others say to deny or conceal these facts, all that would be of no use, for his knowledge of these facts would still remain accurate and true. Furthermore, someone else without the use of a sign and without having the capacity or possibility to hear the voices of other humans, non-humans, or devas, is one who feels the reverberations of thoughts while another is thinking and pondering them. But as this is going on, he penetrates the other's heart and mind through his concentrated mind and thereby declares, your mind is in such and such a state, and it is so and not otherwise. These are the thoughts you are having and pondering, and these are your intentions. In this manner, he declares what he sees with accuracy and certainty, and no matter what others say to deny or conceal these facts, all that would be of no use, for his seeing would still remain accurate and true. In this case, if you notice, there's a slight difference, because here the individual is feeling, you want to call it frequency or vibes, that are put out by the thoughts. It's interesting because even today, science is struggling to measure, because they finally see that thoughts have their own frequency. So all these towers, all these different vibrations or frequencies that we're exposed to, we usually call them the electromagnetic spectrum, right? From gamma rays all the way down to the opposite spectrum, we have radio waves. And in between, we have a whole spectrum, such as visible light spectrum, we have ultraviolet light, we have, I mentioned radio waves, microwaves, so gamma, radio. In between, you have a whole slew of different waves and frequencies. Each of these has their own frequency. Now, the problem is that we are susceptible to these. That's why if you live next to or underneath a major tower, that's, let's say, 5G tower or something like that, or even if you're surrounded by electronics and things, even a computer or your phone or your laptop, any gadget like that that is putting out a frequency, it is affecting your mind state. Not in a good way. That's why you have to turn them all off when you're in the vicinity or close to them. Your phone has to be turned off, including Wi-Fi of your phone or something like that, because it is affecting your brain. This is modern science, by the way. There's enough data to prove that it is detrimental to our health. Now, having said that, the mind is putting out these thoughts, and each thought has its quality, has its flavor, has its vibration, if you will, has its frequency. That's why we like certain sounds, certain frequencies, than we do others. The sound of a church bell, for example, or the sound of birds chirping, or the sound of the rustling of leaves on the forest floor, or the gentle sound of water in a creek. These are healing. These can be healing, and they have their own vibration. They have their own frequency that makes us feel a certain way, versus the screeching of the brakes on a car before it crashes, or the yelling, screaming of someone at someone else, or the sound of a bomb exploding. All these have a different damaging impact. So here we have a person who has trained his receptivity of these frequencies to such a level that he detects the thoughts vibrating, because that's what's also happening even when we are hearing a sound. Because the air molecules between the point of origin of the sound, let's say someone opening and closing their mouth and releasing air in a certain way, that's the sound, by the way, coming out from the larynx. So now we have the pressure that's bumping against the air molecules between that person, the source, and the eardrum with us. And you have a brain that is able to translate those sounds that are hitting the eardrum, that are carrying into the brain, and the brain is able to interpret. How did you know that there's a sound? Reverberation. So here you have a grosser example of, here we use the example of a sound, but the mind putting out thoughts is the same. I think it has happened to every one of us at one point in our lives, at least, where you walk into a place, or you sit next to someone, or you're surrounded by individuals, or even if there's no one there, but they were there up until a certain point, and you walk in and you feel a certain way. The vibrations, or reverberations, as I use in English here, of the energy that they put out, or they're putting in at that moment. The person might be smiling, but they might hate your guts, or they mean you harm. Sometimes it's so strong that it drives you to get up and leave the place, or want to stay there longer, because it's the opposite of that. It's a loving energy, loving thoughts. That's why the practice of metta is all about this. So Here we have a person who's able to detect and then claim, your mind is in such and such a state, and it is so and not otherwise. These are the thoughts you are having and pondering, and these are your intentions. In this manner, he declares what he sees with accuracy and certainty, and no matter what others say to deny or conceal these facts, all that would be of no use, for his seeing would still remain accurate and true. Because he knows it. It's experientially felt. This person knows this is what's going on. Furthermore, someone else without the use of a sign, without having the capacity or possibility to hear the voices of other humans, non-humans, etc., and without the feeling of reverberations of thoughts that another is thinking and pondering, but instead having himself attained the collected and stable state of heart, and does not include thinking and pondering, directs his mind. So this is beyond the first jhana, by the way. When it says beyond thinking, does not include thinking and pondering, that means the person has gone beyond the first jhana. Because only in the first jhana, you still can maintain thinking and pondering, as I think I mentioned last week. So he directs his mind while encompassing the other's mind. As a result, he comes to know and understand. So he encompasses the mind of the other. So it's almost like putting the other person's and yours into this mental bag, into this mental net, and you're capturing whatever they're thinking. Because you're directed there. Your attention is there. You're completely open. As a result, the person says, this person is having such and such mental preparations, in this case, saṅgāras, that are priming him in this way, that are driving him in this way. It's a habitual pattern, a habitual drive that are leading him, priming him to behave in this way, to the point where his next thought will be this or that. So this way you can even be able to detect what their next move will be. Even though they're hiding, they're trying to hide, that is, in the most subtle ways or masterfully, but it's impossible for you not to see what their next move will be. In this manner, he declares what he sees with accuracy and certainty, and no matter what others say. So that's the refrain, if you noticed. All that would be of no use, for his penetrative sight and knowing would still remain accurate and true. This Brahmin is the miracle of knowing the hearts and minds of others along with their intentions. So that basically the Buddha gave Saṅgārava the breakdown of how the ability comes about where a person can know the other's thoughts, meaning telepathic, even though it's not accurate. Tele means far, telescope, see far. So anyhow, and what Brahmin is the miracle of instruction? Here, Brahmin, someone advises another. Think in this manner. Do not think in that manner. Pay attention and attend to these things, and do not pay attention or attend to those things over there. Get rid of and abandon these things and develop those other qualities, and then abide in them. This is what a true teacher does. Shows you the way and tells you what you must do to get the results you want. Doesn't sugarcoat anything. Doesn't try to please you. They're the teacher. And you are there to learn. This then, Brahmin, is the miracle of instruction. Now, Brahmin, among these three miracles, which one would you say is your favorite? This is interesting. So Lord Buddha just laid it out. What we understand as miracles in the Dhamma, in the Sasana, as taught by the Buddha. So the miracle of psychic powers, and then the miracle of seeing or knowing the thoughts and intentions of someone else. And then 3, the miracle of instruction. Well, now, okay, so here is Saṅgārava's response. Well, Venerable Sir, as far as the first miracle of psychic powers, where someone uses various forms of psychic power, such as while being one, he becomes many, and so he's repeating all that, all those abilities. Well, this to me, Master Gotama, seems that it could be a magical trick. It could be. He's not saying it is, but it could be, he says. Because, you have individuals over the course of human history who claim to be, you know, miracle workers. You have every once in a while, you have some person coming out. A few of them showed up from Central or South America, claiming that they heal a person while they're alive, while they're sitting there without anesthesia. They can put their hand inside the body and pull out a rabbit or something, or some heal them from something, and they have these things, and all of a sudden you think, oh wow, there's blood in their hand. And then after some time, after a lot of money is made and a lot of people are fooled, it's discovered that it was just, sleight of hand. It was just tricks. There was no miracle. But everyone else around them were very carefully looking. Even cameras were there observing, and they didn't see anything because the person had perfected the deception. So it could be a fake. It could be like David Copperfield and others. You go to places and resorts and casinos, this and that, and these are just entertainers. Harry Houdini was one of the biggest deceivers. He actually worked for the U.S. He was a secret agent for the U.S. Intelligence agencies. I didn't know that. But everybody believed that, wow, he's getting out of some miracle. He's able to get out himself out of these chains in a prison. No, it's just tricks. So he is smart. Saṅgārava is smart. He's saying all that, it might be true, but as far as I think about this matter, I think it could be a magical trick also for many of them. And with the other miracle, Venerable Sir, whereby someone, through the use of a sign, nimitta, as his base, understands and declares to another, your mind is in such and such a state, and it is so, and not otherwise. These are the thoughts you are having and pondering, and these are your intentions. Well, this too, Master Gotama, seems to me that it could be a magical trick. Sometimes, if you've studied psychology of human behavior, and especially, I think it's called forensic. There is a branch of psychology called forensic psychology, of course, to read the person. But if you're a real good psychologist, or in this case, psychotherapist, you're able to see the behavior of the person, the subtle nuances. And depending on how much you've been exposed to such things, situations, and varieties of human expression, you can be able to tell what the person is going to say next. There's no supernatural ability there. You just have been exposed to that, and you have some scientific background in that, in analysis, how the person twitches, and and before they say something, what they do, etc. For that reason, many people actually wear dark glasses in some settings to hide their true intentions, because they say the eyes do not lie, etc. So you could be able to read what the person is going to do next based on your level of comprehension and understanding of looking at a person's eye movement, for example, or the body. Not necessarily supernatural. So he's saying that could be a magical trick. As for the other miracle, Venerable Sir, whereby someone else, without the use of a sign, so he's addressing still the reading the other person's mind when he says the other miracle. He's not talking about the teaching miracle. So all these different breakdowns that the Buddha said about not using an nimitta and using the voices of other beings such as the devas to be able to. Because in the suttas, for example, we have a lot of places where the devas come and declare something, especially in terms of, for example, Devadatta, when he was planning on breaking the Sangha, the devas were the first to come to the Buddha and declare. Or when Devadatta was planning something to kill the Buddha, the devas quickly rushed to the Buddha and said, Bhante, Devadatta is planning to do this, to kill. He's setting up a trap. Next time the Buddha is going to be on Pindapada, on his arms round, he has gathered some assassins, archers, to kill the Blessed One. And he had hired other assassins to kill those archers who didn't know about what was happening. And then he had hired other archers to kill the second group of archers. All that came to the Buddha's, attention thanks to the devas. And then he looked with his mind and he saw this was the case. As well as in situations where a person was about to become an arhat. The devas, in their excitement, would go and report the matter to the Buddha. So the devas can and do relate a lot of information. So in this case, the person might be gaining that information through non-humans. Not just devas, because if you are paying attention to animals, for example, if you see an abnormal behavior, such as a time of an earthquake, before it happens, dogs will start barking, cats will behave differently, they will rush out of the room suddenly, all of them, or the birds will behave differently. If you're attentive, these are non-human beings, right? You will be more cognizant that something else is going to happen now, something unusual. So that is also them letting you know something is going to happen. So that's also which he doesn't call a miracle. It could be some magical trick or some skill. So he doesn't consider that to be superior. And with the other miracle, Venerable Sir, whereby someone else, without using some kind of a sign and without having the capacity or possibility to hear the voices of other humans, non-humans or devas, feels the reverberations of thoughts as another is thinking and pondering while penetrating the other's heart and mind through his concentrated mind, and thereby declares your mind in such and such a state, and it is so, etc., etc. Here too, Venerable Sir, I think one could do this by some magical trick as well. What I think I can think of right now is the lie detector test, and that many experts say they can lie their way through. But for the regular person, most of the time they will be detected as lying. So the person who's looking at the chart, the graph, and all the wires moving, or the graph recording, because they're all tied up and their key areas of the body are being registered, that person who's reading those is not psychic, is not experiencing spiritual or supernatural abilities. He's just reading. So that could also be tricked, where the person says you just lied there, for example. And the same goes with NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, that many people use nowadays. Tricks, or hacks that can allow you to know something more than the average person about this person or the situation. So he's saying, I don't consider that a superior ability, Bhante, either. And with the other miracle, Venerable Sir, whereby someone else, without the use of sign or the devas, he directs his mind while encompassing the other's mind. As a result, he comes to know and understand this person is having such and such a mental saṅgāra that are priming him in this way, to the point where his next thought will be this. Well, this too, Venerable Sir, seems it could be a magical trick. Again, these are not necessarily magical tricks, but he's saying to him, they're considered most probably magical because this is beyond him. And there's a valid point here, because it could be or it could not be. But either way, who cares? Because this has to do with the person. This does not impact the other person. It's very individualized. So it doesn't change the nature of the world. It doesn't help someone else necessarily. That is the key common denominator throughout the sutta. Remember that. This is not a sutta about magical tricks or even miracles. This has to do with the influence that one's actions and behavior could have in improving one's own life as well as those of others. The proper way, remember, he started with sacrifice, is wrong. His deluded thinking, wrong view was by sacrificing, I will help myself, gaining a lot of merits as well as others. That is the wrong view. I hope more Buddhists could actually listen to this, especially Mahayanists. One's own actions, the Buddha is saying. But here, remember, he is now getting to the third one. However, Bande, the third miracle, where someone advises another thus, think in this manner, do not think in that manner. Pay attention and attend to these things, and do not pay attention or attend to those things over there. Get rid of and abandon these things and develop those other qualities and then abide in them. This happens to be it for me, Master Gautama. The miracle of instruction is my favorite among all the three miracles. It is wonderful, Master Gautama, how brilliantly these words were expressed by Master Gautama. For we are confident that Master Gautama is capable of performing each of these three miracles, because surely Master Gautama possesses and uses the various forms of psychic power as mentioned, such as being one, he becomes many, and by becoming many, so he's listing now. So he's saying, surely the Buddha has these qualities. You must have these qualities. Also, he is able to apply the miracle of knowing the hearts and minds of others along with their intentions through the use of a sign, nimitta as his base, and without a sign, with the use of the devas, with the use of watching the reverberations of thoughts, as well as directing his mind, all these things. He says, of course, Siddhartha, the Master Gautama has these. In addition, Master Gautama, while using the third miracle, which he obviously possesses, advises his students, think in this manner, do not think in that manner. Pay attention and attend to these things, and do not pay attention or attend to those things over there. Get rid of and abandon these things and develop those other qualities and then abide in them. So, in a sense, he was mocking the Buddha. And how do we know that? Because these are just words. For example, I'm narrating, I'm reading them to you. I could be narrating them or reading them to you in a correct way or incorrect way. How do we know that his intentions were not good in saying these words? From what follows. So when we read the suttas, we have to put ourselves aside and look at the context, look at the relationships. These are human beings talking with each other in a relatable environment. What he came with, Saṅgārava, and what the Buddha was saying, and then Venerable Ananda tried to poke at it, see whether he really got it. But apparently he is quite arrogant, because now he turned around. Even though the Buddha explained it beautifully, he still was not content. He still was not convinced. And now he turned around and is basically pretending that, the Buddha must have all these qualities. Because apparently this is the first time he's coming to see the Buddha, because he would already know that the Buddha has at least the third miracle of teaching, because he would have heard already the Buddha teaching others before him. So this is what's happening. Let's see what the Buddha said. However, the Blessed One replied to the Brahmin Saṅgārava's comments by saying, Brahmin, even though you have spoken words that were not heartfelt or authentic at all, through the means of your flattery, which were therefore intended to be insulting to me, I will, nevertheless, give you the answer. It is indeed a fact, for I do possess and can use the various forms of psychic powers mentioned, such as while being one, I can become many, and on having become many, I can revert back to being one. I appear and disappear without any obstructions, moving through walls unhindered, through solid and impenetrable embankments and rocks, as though passing through space. I dive into the earth and come out of it as though it were liquid water. I walk on water as though it were solid ground. While sitting cross-legged, I can travel in space like a small or a large bird. And with my bare hand, I can touch the moon and the sun that are so powerful, thus wielding my powers unobstructed as far as the Brahma world itself. None of these qualities make the Buddha, by the way. We do not respect, venerate, and take refuge in the Buddha because he can walk on water, or that he can fly. No. We do not take refuge in the Triple Gem or in the Buddha specifically because he's able to do these magical or psychic tricks. No, none of those things. We respect, venerate, and follow his example because he has crossed over the flood. He has done it. He freed himself from suffering. And we want to learn how to do that. That's why we listen. That's why we practice. That's why we read the suttas. That's why we explore the suttas, as is the case. So this is the Blessed One's way of telling him, even though you flatter me, which means you don't believe in any of the things you're saying, I do these things. I have these abilities. After all, he's the one who taught Mahamoggallana how to become number one in psychic abilities. You have countless examples where the Buddha is sitting in and teaching, and in his mind he sees another student over there, hundreds of miles away, struggling with some issue, with some part of the practice he's not able to overcome. While his body is still here, he goes to that student miles away. In the flesh, he makes a copy of his body and sits there and he teaches the student. And then he comes back to this body. This was a normal occurrence for the Buddha, to the point where many of the bhikkhus, in fact, had already in their kutis, always hoping, I think, as a good student would, to have the teacher to drop by. So they would have a cushion ready for the Buddha, just in case he shows up. Just in case he shows up. Because they knew they had seen the Buddha do this, not overheard it. Also, I am able to apply the miracle of knowing the hearts and minds of others along with their intentions through the use of a sign, nimitta, as my base, whereby I understand and declare your mind is in such and such a state, and it is so and not otherwise. In this way, I declare what I see with accuracy and certainty, and no matter what others say to deny or conceal these facts, all that is of no use, for my seeing would still remain accurate and true. Furthermore, without the use of a sign, he's repeating all those. I don't think I need to read that because it's a refrain. This is the third time. I would be going over it otherwise. Furthermore, without the use of a sign, with the help of the devas, etc. I declare what I see with accuracy and certainty. And then, in addition, in this manner, I declare that what I see with accuracy and certainty, and no matter what others say to deny or conceal these facts, all that is of no use, for my seeing would still remain accurate and true. In addition, while using the third miracle, I advise my students, think in this manner, do not think in that manner. Pay attention and attend to these things, and do not pay attention or attend to those things over there. Get rid of and abandon these things and develop those other qualities, and then abide in them. Isn't that what the Buddha did with every single one of the students? Isn't that what he said to Bahya? Bahya, when you see something, don't get sucked or pulled into its features or details. When seeing, there's just a scene. When hearing, don't make up a story about what you are hearing. Get pulled into its details. Just see it as something that is heard, and that's it. When sensing, feeling something, whether it's the nose, smelling something, the taste buds, the tongue, the body feeling something, sensing, there's just the thing that has been sensed, and that's all. And especially when there is a thought occurring, an idea, a perception that comes, a memory that comes. Don't go on a joyride. Don't just disappear into it. Don't be pulled into it. Proliferating conceptual ideas and things to get lost in that maze. No, just observe with sati that it is just a thought that has been known, cognized. Vinyate vinyatamatam bhavisati. There's just that. That's what the Buddha said. Isn't that what he said to Angulimala, the butcher, the serial killer, who had killed 999? And he wanted to kill his mom as the 1,000th victim, which Lord Buddha interfered. And then he turned to Angulimala, disciplining him, training him, teaching him. Angulimala, or in this case, he would call him ahinsaka, the opposite. Ahinsaka means the one who does not harm a being. He said, ahinsaka, what are you doing? You're still running. Stop it. And guiding him properly, Angulimala dropped to his knees, threw away his weapons in tears. Half a minute ago, he was about to kill the Buddha. He said to him, don't do these things, do this instead. Abandon these rageful, passionate drives you have been following madly, in pain, lost in this torturous existence of yours, where there's no outlet, there's no going beyond it through these means. Just hearing the Buddha's words, he attained to the first stage of awakening. He became Sotapanna, Angulimala, through the miracle of teaching. Was that a superior behavior, superior benefit, a meritorious deed that was done by a recluse? Was that self-centered on part of the Buddha? Did his practice of being a recluse help someone else? Countless are the examples. I still am waiting to see a single example where by following the Bodhisattva vow, somebody else was benefited. Somebody else became awakened. It's impossible because one has not awakened oneself because they have not put on their mask first. They have not put on their seatbelt first. But they're thinking about the other person to put their seatbelt first. Craziness. That's not Dhamma. This is Dhamma. And the Brahmin Saṅgārava then exclaimed in astonishment, but Master Gotama, could there be even one other bhikkhu who is capable of performing all these three miracles other than Master Gotama? He still cannot fathom that. Maybe he can fathom that there's one person and the Buddha is the guy, is the teacher who has these three miracles in him. But could there be more? And the Buddha says, Brahmin, there is not just 100, 200, 300, 400, or just 500 of my disciples who are now capable in performing these feats, but many, many more indeed, who truly possess these miraculous abilities as well. That's a lion's roar, by the way. But where are these bhikkhus currently residing, Master Gotama? Look around you, Brahmin. They are here in the same Sangha of bhikkhus. Open your eyes, he said. They're around you. You're sitting among them. Quiet, shaven head, tattered robes from cremation ground, sitting there without much fanfare, without much noise, without much bells and whistles. Nothing that your ears could detect, like sacrifices and the sounds and the bells and all those things. But they, each of these bhikkhus, were the embodiment of those three miracles. Then, on hearing these words spoken to him by the Blessed One himself, the young Brahmin Saṅgārava, in total delight, exclaimed, "It is truly magnificent, Venerable Sir, quite remarkable and amazing indeed, Venerable Sir. For the Blessed One has made the Dhamma clear to me in many ways. It is as though he turned upright what had been turned upside down, and revealed to me what was hidden, showing the way to one who was lost, holding up a lamp in the dark for those with eyesight to see. I go to the Blessed One for refuge, and to the Dhamma, and to the Sangha of bhikkhus. From this day forward, Bhante, may the Blessed One kindly remember me as a lay disciple of his, who has taken refuge in him from today until the end of life." Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Isn't it a beautiful sutta? So relevant. At a time period where we keep hearing everybody's trying to teach us something, everybody's saying something. But what are they saying? Is it true? Already that fails the first criterion. Is it true? That already is a big indicator that it's not true, and they failed. But everybody carries themselves as though they're experts these days, not just in the field of Dhamma, in other areas of human endeavor as well. Everybody's selling themselves as though they know what they're talking about. We are living in a world where there's so much deception that it's so hard for us to know what's what, but especially in the field of Dhamma. That's why we're going back to the original teachings of the Buddha, because there's so much junk out there in the name of Dhamma, To this day, even sadly by Theravadan monks, even especially sadly by elder monks. But we don't have to worry about that because the Buddha word is very clear. It's sharp, sharper than a laser in cutting through all the nonsense. Because you have to bring it into your life and use the same measure of deciphering through nonsense in your own personal life. When someone comes to you with inauthentic statements, how do you know, first of all, that they're inauthentic? You give them a shot. You give them opportunities to display to you, to tell you, to at least get a chance to show you the possibility of those words to be true. You give them the benefit of a doubt, in other words. But what if again and again they fail you? They prove their words to have been nothing but hogwash, lies, deceptions. What do you do? Do you still wait? Do you still want to give them opportunities? How about if you go and want to buy milk from the store? It says milk. It's a supermarket. It's a food place, and you buy it, and it says clearly it's milk. You bring it home, and you pour it in, and it's ketchup, or it's lemonade, or it's glue. But it says milk. You paid for milk. What is this? Or it's empty. The carton, the bottle is empty. Do you pretend to be drinking milk when it's not? When there's nothing? How about when you go to a doctor because you have an illness? Do you go to a shoe store? Do you go to a mechanic when your eyes are in pain? When there's a tumor in your body, do you go to a grocery store? Do you go to your tax person, accountant, to fix it for you? No, you go to the doctor who knows how to do that, who knows how to operate, to remove it from you, that toxin. You know these things in your own life. You apply these measures of clear, thought out, pragmatic steps that you have to take to protect yourself and to gain what it is you want to gain in life. Okay, when it comes to the Dhamma, how come we don't do that? Why do we gamble with our spiritual life? Why do we expect that, no, here it's different. I can just play it by ear. I can do my own thing. Have you ever operated on your eye? Have you ever opened up your brain to pull out a tumor? Have you ever tried to make actual milk from a cow? I mean, this might sound, nonsensical of a question, but we have to approach it like that when we're to approach our own attitude as far as the pragmatic nature of the Dhamma. That's what I'm driving at. Because there's a lot of lies and deceptions in the world. The world is like that. It will be like that always, whether there is Dhamma or not. So how do we live then with the intention of not experiencing pain, to cut the cord of continued existence? If you want to continue existing and undergo pain, birth, death, and all the experiences that come along with those, then go ahead and do whatever it is. You don't need the Dhamma. just add some good deeds so that you end up in a good place here and there. But you're going to be stuck, undergoing rebirth in lower realms more than the higher realms, for sure. Because law of averages, we have done more harm than good in our past. But is that why we're here? Is that why we're exposed to the Dhamma? To keep on going on the samsaric wheel? No. We're here to end it. Okay, let's practice properly. For that, the miracle of teaching that the Buddha had and shared with us have to be welcomed by us. This is what's missing in the world. The Buddha constantly is teaching through these suttas. Are we there to listen? Are we there to practice? Or are we there to simply sift through and only pick up whatever we like and drop the huge quantities of Dhamma that we do not like? Well, that's the surest way to continue existing in the samsaric hamster wheel. So this is why this path is for those of us who are courageous enough to really grab the baton and go. The Buddha is passing us the baton. He made it, He passed beyond, crossed over the flood. We, on the other hand, we're still on this side of the flood because we're suffering, we're struggling. We're in this world after all. And the world is suffering. So even 26 centuries later, the Buddha, having crossed over, is still helping us. That's why you're still here, week after week, for a reason. That's the answer that Saṅgārava needed to hear. That even 26 centuries later, that recluse who walked away from the court life in Kapilavatthu, from being a crown prince, cut off his hair, went forth, relinquished his jewelry and all his fancy robes, donned the robe of a bhikkhu, walked into the unknown, and then eventually found the path and shared it with humanity and all other beings. We are still benefiting from that to this day. This is how we can also understand innumerable beings that have been benefited from that single person. That's the answer to all those who think that this path is a selfish one, self-absorbed one. That's all nonsense. The Buddha is the first arahant, the first bhikkhu. And his work still brings such blessings to countless, countless beings, inclusive of ourselves. So I'll stop here and see if there are any questions, comments. It seems a very, simplistic sutta, but I encourage you to read it again at your own pace. And yeah, it's already on the website, so the PDF. So if there are no questions, let us transfer some merits. Akasatha chubumata devanagamahiddhika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakhantu lokasasanam. Akasatha chubumata devanagamahiddhika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakhantu desanam. Akasatha chubumata devanagamahiddhika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakhantu mamparanti. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. May you continue in your practice, in your exercise, training of the Dhamma. May you fearlessly continue diving into it. May you continuously be encouraged to trust and be fearless and courageous despite what the mind says. Trust the heart, expand, allow, open. But while your feet are solidly on Sila, Samadhi, Panya, understanding and giving virtue its place, primacy, very important role in your life. Maintaining sati throughout your day, throughout your waking hours, practicing meditation, and trying to pick out one verse of the Buddha, one sentence, something that speaks to you, and allow it to reverberate in your mind. Allow it to sink in. And with the other two, trainings, you will develop more and more in your insights. That's the Panya portion, the third training. And may the merits of all this work be shared with all those who are suffering in the world today, especially. May the Devas support this planet. Our virtue helps the Devas to come back to this planet. There's so much non-virtuous, evil beings, human and non-human, in the world today. There's so many lies, so many deceptions. So this is the best time for the words, the teachings of the Dhamma, the teachings of the Buddha, to really be loudly lived by us. And that will really attract even the Brahma gods to come back to this earth, to protect us, the four great kings. To remember in the Saṅgārava Sutta we covered months ago, the four great kings have made a vow to the Triple Gem, to the Buddha, to protect all those who practice, not just the world, but especially those who practice this path truly. So by you keeping your virtue alive, by you practicing sati, by you probing and trying to understand the words of the Buddha, pulling yourself out of the mire, of the quicksand of ignorance, of who you were yesterday, up until yesterday, relinquishing that, that will help this planet tremendously. Then the four great kings will have plenty of reason to rush in to the rescue of this planet, despite what the majority might be doing. That's another way of understanding the fruit of the recluse-ship. Recluse-ship here does not mean someone in robes only. Put your heart in robes. That is reclusehood, whether you're a layperson or a monk. That's my advice to you. Until next time, Sukhiyant.